Okay, well, good evening from London, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Lynn Julius, and I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of Harif. And I'm here together with Lawrence here, our technical expert. For those of you who are new to Harif, we are a small band of volunteers, and we aim to raise awareness of the history and culture and really the existence of Jews from Arab and Muslim countries, Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. And we organize events and talks, and we've been broadcasting more or less weekly since for the last year or so, since the beginning of the crisis. If you're not already signed up to our mailing list, please do so. Please go to www.harif.org. And even if you are signed up, please go and visit the website because it is brand new. It went live today. Got a brand new website. Let us know what you think of it. We've also got a sister site called Point of No Return, which is a blog, and that keeps you up to date with the news. This session is being live streamed to the Harif Facebook page, and it's also being recorded. As there are quite a few of you on the call, please don't raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Just type it into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to let you ask your question or make your comment after the presentation. Well, tonight we are doing the second in our double bill on India after last week's very interesting presentation by Maisie Meyer. We have Dr. Ken Robbins with us, joining us from Washington, DC. The topic of tonight's talk is Baghdadis in Bollywood. Although the smallest of India's minorities, Jews played an important role in the world's largest film industry, Bollywood. Almost all of India's earliest silent movie stars were female Baghdadi Jews. So our lecturer tonight, Ken X Robbins, he'll tell you what the X stands for, I can't remember now. But it's a Greek name, is a psychiatrist, a collector of South Asian art, and author of Western Jews in India, from the 15th century to the present. He is editing currently 3 volumes on Jews and Muslims in South Asia. And I would just like to mention my thanks to Sarah Manasseh for introducing me to Ken. And I'm sure we are going to have a fascinating presentation from him. So over to you, Ken, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Could we enable the
share screen?
Screen.
Yes, apparently you can. If you just press share
okay.
Screen.
Can you see? Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, I am a collector and archivist, and I collect all sorts of materials.
No, we can't see your screen share, Ken. It's not come up.
Yeah.
It hasn't come up yet.
No.
Let me. I see it. Okay.
Yeah. There we go. Perfect.
Let me just get the full Monty. There we go.
Perfect.
So both the Baghdadis and the Beni Israel were in Indian movies. These are 2 Indian Jewish movies. And the story that I'm going to tell is a little bit more complex than what is generally said, but I hope you'll bear with me because I'm the kind of person who, if I start with a simple story, and there were a few Jews in India and there have been a million books written about them, somehow I'm winding up writing 8 books. And I'm dividing it up by 4 different topics. One is the Jewish communities, and you see the volume in the middle is a guidebook to the history and synagogues of Mumbai and the area around Mumbai. The second subject is foreign Jews in India. And we had the unfortunate title of the book, Western Jews in India. And I wanted American and European Jews, because if you think of where India is in relationship to Baghdad, then Baghdadis are Western Jews as well. And the third category is the contributions that that Jews have made, both foreign and Indian Jews have made to the world. And you find some very extraordinary sort of things. For example, there are, you see the woman in the lower left. Anna Malka is a British Jew who became a Muslim, and there she is on a Pakistani stamp. One of two of Pakistan's most famous artists were in fact Jewish, and two of the four most important speakers about the nature of Islam and political Islam and so on and so forth in Pakistan were born as Leopold Weiss and Margaret Marcus, but before they took Muslim names. So you find Jews all over the map. And the fourth category is the relationship between Jews and other groups. So each of these topics gets all sorts of long conversations from me, because these are the sort of things you say, and I'm try to be very particular in what I say and not make generalities. So this is what they said in the Times of India when Jews ran Bollywood. Jews never ran Bollywood. And Jews, according to this, took advantage of prohibition against Muslim and Hindu actors and female Hindu and Muslim actors at the time. And there are a number of Jews who were mentioned. Some of them who are mentioned, who are silent movie actresses, were in fact not Jewish. Others who were in later movies also very often credited as being in the silent movies. And this is because supposedly the Hindu actresses were not there. So I've got to straighten all this out for you, which you won't remember. But I think you'll find that if you stick with facts, that the accomplishment of Jews in so many different areas was greater than we had thought. So first, everybody should be able to recognize the Jew. Everybody knows what Jews look like. When this poster was made for me, I didn't actually change because I absolutely loved it. First of all, it's a beautiful image. And the reason that somebody else would have changed it is that one of these two actors is not Jewish. Can you tell me which one it is?
Well, since everyone is muted, I'm the only one who you can ask. And I reckon the one who's not Jewish is the man.
You are correct. Genius. So at the end of this, we'll have a test. I'll play a movie clip with a lot of characters, and you're going to tell me, everybody's going to tell me who the Jew is. So is this what a Jew in India looks like? I don't think so. There are in fact multiple Jewish communities. The most famous community is in fact the smallest of three, and it's in the area around Cochin in Kerala. It's a very complicated sort of history, which I won't go into because they really basically were not in the movies. The area around Bombay and Pune and the coastal areas there were the homeland of the Beni Israel, who are indigenous Indian Jews who have been there God knows how long. That's also a very complicated story. They were involved in the movies, and I'm going to give you a few things about them, but we're going to concentrate on Baghdadis. And the third group was so-called Baghdadis, who were in places where movies were made, which were Calcutta and Bombay, and they were a very cultured and wonderful community. I don't want you to think that because somebody's labeled Baghdadi Jews, that they all came from Baghdad. Some came from Aleppo and other places as well. And the history of India has been such, if we're tracing the trade in diasporas, you'll find that people have been coming to India, Jews from Egypt, from Persia, and so on and so forth, as well as from Baghdad throughout the years. So let's go with the indigenous community, the Beni Israel. The Beni Israel were known as soldiers. They had a very strong military history, and here's one of the soldiers. His ancestor was, in fact, captured by a Muslim sultan, and in honor for his release, he created the first Beni Israel synagogue in 1796. And his descendants, including David Hayam Devakar, were the heads of this synagogue. Now, what's interesting is that these people took Indian names. Divakar means somebody who came from a place called Div, and it was a name that both the local people and the Indian Jews used. And they spoke the Marathi language, the local language, and David Hayam, the head of the synagogue, was a great guy in the theater, and he wrote plays in multiple languages, including Sufi romances, plays about Krishna, and of course your standard Moses, and he acted in The Merchant of Venice, which he adapted, and so on and so forth. So these people were multilingual, and they worked in all sorts of things. They were part of the community and yet not part of the community. The thing that we get into trouble with is when you're looking at a book like this, and I looking at this book, twice the book mentions Divakar. They mention this David Hayam Divakar, and later they mention Divakar, they don't give a first name. And they in fact say that there was a movie made in 1912 in which Divakar played an important role, and it was a film that had a female actress. So the first Indian film before the most famous one of 1913 had a female actress in it, and it was associated with Divakar. But this was a different Divakar, and he wasn't Jewish. I say this for a particular reason, because every time I go, I find that people like twist the facts and they make it a nice, neat package. And Jews do so many things, so many great things, that it's difficult to make a simple package. There's always one more thing that a Jew has done. There were several of the Beni Israel who were movie actors, including Henrik Isaacson, the most famous of which was David. He was in about 250 pictures. Another one was Eliezer. And there were also actors named Benjamin and Samson, and I don't know whether they were Jews. Somebody talking about David noticed that he worked as many as 3 or 4 films at the same time. And the way in which he was regarded, you say, how were Jews regarded? People would take things that I would regard as anti-Semitic, and they wouldn't even know that they were anti-Semitic. They said, because he was interested in money and he was such a good businessman, he would act in 4 movies at the same time. And this raises the whole question of when we see somebody who's supposedly Jewish, is everything they do Jewish? Because a Jewish person doesn't make it Jewish. Let me give you an example of how silly this sometimes becomes. This is a great actress, Baghdadi, Ramallah. And according to this laudatory essay about her, she's a Jewess and she's naturally frugal, not only with her earnings, but with her petite figure. So she diets. You know, Jewish women, according to this, must be all very thin because of this stereotype. The person is not trying to make an anti-Semitic mark. He's trying to show he knows what Jews are like. And these are the kind of stereotypes that I'm fighting against. Another stereotype we see, which is not anti-Semitic in other ways, is the idea that all of these Jewish actresses, the Baghdadi actresses, were very sexy and sex bots. So I want to show you Ramallah. So she certainly was a very wholesome creature. What I'm afraid of, if I showed you some of the others, that you'd make generalizations from that. Just like any other group, Jews had actresses who had different types of, played different types of roles based on their personality. So who were the silent movie actresses who were Jewish? The first one was not even in Bombay, but was Arati Devi, and who appeared in 3 movies before she gave it up at an early age to marry her sweetheart. So she looks very Indian. And I'll show you the pictures on the right-hand side of the next slide. She looks very Indian. Well, here's what she looked like in real life. Her marriage picture and her picture with her husband and her 2 children living in Calcutta her whole life. This is a woman whose father went out of business in Rangoon, moved to Calcutta. Family was in difficulty for a little while, but she lived her whole life as a Jewish woman in Calcutta. But you would never think of her being, based on the way she dressed and everything, as being particularly Indian. But look at how she was in the movies. Now, her cousin, her father and her uncle were in business in that Software company in Rangoon. And her cousin also became a famous actor. Now, there are 2 Abraham Sofares. They're different people. There's a very distinguished lawyer who worked with Nixon, who's, by the way, is an excellent singer too, of jazz and American Songbook. But this is a different Abraham Sofer, and I first came acquainted with him when I was a boy, and he was Jeannie's genie on a TV show called I Dream of Jeannie. And he was in every movie and TV show that I saw. So here he is, an Indian Jew as an American Indian with Groucho Marx in a movie, The Story of Mankind. He didn't only appear in movies and TV in the United States. Before that, he was in England, where he was played with the Old Vic. He had his own theatrical company, and he toured in many different plays with Helen Hayes. He played Shylock in The Merchant of Venice with Helen Hayes. He played also, what's the other one? Disraeli in Disraeli with Helen Hayes and the touring company. So he was a prolific actor in London and Hollywood. So if we have an Indian Jew as an American Indian, we should have an Indian Jew as an American cowboy. So this is Ezra Mir from Calcutta. Ezra Mir in the 20s came to Hollywood. He worked with Cecil B. DeMille, among other people, made an interesting avant-garde film with Dolores Del Rio, then came back to India, where he made tons of early movies. I point out 2 in the lower right, Noor Jahan, which was the second Indian talkie, starring a Jewish woman, which I'll show you in a minute, and Zarina, which is famous for its heroine, who was the daughter of an East African ruler who ruled near Surat in Gujarat. And that's famous for one of the longest kisses in movie history. And for decades after the Jews got through with the movies, there was a code, and for decades there was no kissing in Indian movies. So what was this film that he made? It was Noor Jahan, about Mughal princess, empress. And the star was another Jew, Mercia Mansfield. And she was the sister-in-law of the son of one of the wealthy Baghdadis, B.N. Elias. And so this film had both a Jewish star and a Jewish person, Ezra Mir, who wrote the sound, music, and dialogue. Very impressive history so far. What his most impressive history is, we really don't know how many documentaries he made. The estimates are 1,000 or more documentaries, many for the Indian government. A very important and forgotten figure in the history of cinema. Then there was another important movie figure who didn't have anything to do with Indian movies. His name was R.J. Meny, grew up in Calcutta. He saw himself very much as an Englishman. I love to read the back of this. He wrote many novels and other books. They described him as a novelist and a playwright and a film producer. And he was at King's College. He was educated at King's College, and he traveled to Tibet and so on and so forth. And he was editor of all these magazines. They don't mention anything about the fact that he's Jewish or any indication in any way that he's Jewish. When he wrote about Calcutta in this book, Nightlife of Calcutta, he wrote about it as if he was an Englishman writing about the stink, the smell of Calcutta. So this, you get no sense of him as anything other than an Englishman. This even comes to more when you consider his most famous movie, based on a book that he wrote called Clive of India, and which played all over India as well as the rest of the world. And this was a real blockbuster film in its day. And I like the blurb where they say a handful of British traders who fought and triumphed against overwhelming odds under Clive's inspiring leadership, making proud of the invincible spirit of the British people. There's no sense of anything Indian or Jewish in him. So this brings us back to the first picture. This picture shows an Indian actress and who's Jewish and a non-Jewish Indian actor. So let's learn a little bit about her. Nadira certainly was a Baghdadi Jew, and the picture on the right shows her in a pose that you would associate with Muslims. But remember, she's an actress. But her most amazing thing was the way in which she could look Indian or not Indian, and the sexy way in which she acted. When we did the exhibit, we had to divide the exhibit in two parts. So we put this picture of her with the cigarette holder and put up a sign, continue the Bollywood experience with Nadira across the hall. But she's famous for her remark, don't sit at the edge of the bed, you'll fall off, come closer, I won't seduce you. These are all pictures, stills from the same movie. And as you can see, she plays a princess in the movie, Savage Princess, and there she is looking like she's Greta Garbo on the left. So let's see what Nadira sounded like.
बहादुर हारा चोर भी है? चोर नहीं, जिसे तुमने बुलावा दिया, मुझे उसका इंतजार भी था। तो ये कहो कि तुम बेचैन थी, तुम्हारा दिल मेरी मोहब्बत को आजमाने के लिए तैयार।
So this brings us back to the original question that's always raised as to why there were Jewish actresses there. There were Jewish actresses there simply because some of them were interested in doing movies and they didn't have some of the prohibitions. The typical sort of thing would be seen like you see on the left. The woman, it's a scene from Indian drama. This is 1882. You see a famous male actor in female dress. And this is the theater that they have. People did not like the idea of seeing women in conjunction with men. It was considered like seeing naked ladies or something like that. It was something that would arouse sexual feelings. The woman would not be seen in a positive way. There was that element, but that was not true all over. There were female troops all over, not only run by Muslim courtesans, but run by women. The most famous of which was in Kerala, the Malayalam troupe of Balamoni, who was before movies. So there were female actresses in the movies, but it still, in many cases, was not that acceptable. On the left, we see a picture of the actor, the male actor who played the female roles in the earliest movies, Anna Solanki. And on the right, we see the male actor who played the female roles in Marathi theater, the theater in and around the Bombay and the Konkan and Pune. And he tried in the movies, but he did not succeed. It actually tried him in a male role. But he, in some ways, was it's a very complicated thing. He was a liberating factor to show how women could appear. So let's look at who were the earliest actors, female actors in silent movies. One of the earliest was an American, Dorothy Kingdom, Patience Cooper, who was Anglo-Indian, half and half, Ermeline, who was a Christian from Goa, and Zubaydah, whose father was an African. And so far, I've only showed you one who was a Jew, and that was Arati Devi. Two of the four actors whose names you see up there have been misidentified as being Jewish. Patience Cooper and Ermeline have both been called Jewish by various people. Over and over again, people couldn't tell the difference between Parsis and Jews and Anglo-Indians and Armenians. That was like one category to many people, even though we would think of these groups as very distinct. So was there anybody who really was important there? Yes, the most important actress of the 1920s, 1930s, silent movies and early talkie movies was Jewish, Ruby Myers. She's such a superstar that she's on an Indian stamp under her screen name Salochana, Bright Eyes. There's a movie called Salochana in Salochana. So even the movie was named after her, not just as the star. She had a long career, and this movie, Anarkali, was made in three versions and over the years, and she played in all three at various times. Many of her movies, her star was a guy named Bill Moria, and they lit up the screen with their magnetism. So what was there about her? To some people, she personifies what the idea of modern Indian woman. So what would a modern Indian woman be? Usually the title that is associated is one of her earliest movies called Telephone Girl. Now, it was considered very risque for a woman and avant-garde for a woman to work outside the home, but she was a telephone girl and she was discovered that way. And the movie was known as Telephone Girl, or as other people don't notice, is Why I Became a Christian. So people were associating modernization with assimilation and leaving Hinduism or Islam. Her version of women was extraordinary because it talked to the various roles that were expected of women. We see two pictures of her in a single movie from 1932. She's the typical Indian woman. She's deserted by her husband. She doesn't lose her chastity. She remains faithful, but she's no shrinking violet. She dances, she defeats the villain in a sword fight, disguises herself as a soldier. So this was an image that she was projecting. With Bill Moria, she very often projected a different image, a very romantic image. And this is one of her most famous kiss scenes. When her Hindi was not very good, even though she came from Pune, and it took her a while to get it up to snuff. So when she remade her silent film Indira BA, Bachelor of Arts, she remade it as a talkie Indira Master of Arts. So she got promoted herself as well. And as you can see, these pictures played all over. This is the playbill from Karachi. One of her most amazing tour de forces was Wildcat, where she played 8 different roles, ranging from a Hollywood blonde to a Muslim gentleman. 8 different roles. To me, one of her most important contributions as an important actress was there was a polemical book that was written by a Westerner called Mother India, which attacked Indians' treatment of women, the virility of India's men, and demands for self-government. Her response was to make a super production extolling India, a truly patriotic gesture. What I found is the questions that I'm interested in raising, and I raised it in this other book, Jews and the Indian National Art Project, where it came up with 14 Jewish women artists from the 18th century on in India. And I didn't really, well, maybe it's really 13. One had a Jewish grandmother and became India's most famous Indian female painter, Amrita Shergill. So this was a woman who had a Hungarian mother. Grandmother was Jewish. Was she Jewish or wasn't she Jewish? So the question that I keep on raising, does the term Indian artist apply to any artist born to the Indian family? Can foreigners and members of minority groups play roles in Indian art and Indian movies? Is something Indian because of its subject matter, its style? Can you utilize foreign techniques in creating Indian art? And all of these questions come up in terms of the movie, where you have certain theatrical traditions, and how do you transport those to the movies? Do you follow Western ways of seeing things, or the transgressive ways of seeing Indian ways of seeing things? Now, one of the big questions that came up, since a lot of people took it seriously, seeing actors portraying Krishna and other Indian gods on stage, should Jews play Hindus or Muslims? That question comes up today. One of the earliest pictures in which this came an issue was a woman named Sabita Devi, who was an Armenian woman from Calcutta, who was very often described as being Jewish, but she was not. She was a Christian. Even today, we have people who take these things seriously. The foremost American scholar about Indian films has written this about female impersonators playing a role in the construction of the new norms of Indian womanhood, complemented by Anglo-Indian and Jewish actresses who masqueraded as Hindu and Parsi heroines. The anomaly of Indian males passing as females and foreign women passing as Indian. I don't see it that way. I see that these people, the Baghdadis and the Beni Israel, were Indians, and that actresses are known for impersonating other things. So how were the Baghdadi involved in this, in local theater? Were they involved in different types of things? On the right-hand side, we have something from the amateur dramatic club of Calcutta, which involved many Jews, including 2 sisters, Mercia Mansfield and Gracia Cohen, both of whom acted in movies. You've already met Mercia Mansfield, who acted in a movie by Ezra Mir, second Indian talkie, and her sister, who acted under the name Vasanta Devi. So they took Hindu names. But they also acted in Western types of dramas. And Indian Jews in Calcutta were involved in Western theater from the or late 19th century. But what's most extraordinary is the British Library has a copy of its most important Urdu play, which is associated with a Muslim ruler in exile in Calcutta, Wajid Ali Shah, and the play is called Indar Saba. And this play is written in Urdu with Hebrew writing. Now, many of you have heard of Judeo-Arabic, but how about Judeo-Urdu? So this whole illustrated play must have been written for the Baghdadi Jews in Calcutta in 1887. Now, one of the questions was, who were the women who did act? Were the Muslims even less likely than the Hindus to act on stage? And the answer is no. Muslim ladies did act, and there was a whole courtesan class. One of these courtesans was a woman who was friendly with the father of a Jewish actress, and she was a courtesan, and she produced a daughter who became a great star as Nargis. So this is the daughter of a courtesan who becomes a star in Indian movies, and you're going to see here with Nadira, but this time Nadira again plays the sexy lady, and the chaste woman is played by the daughter of the courtesan.
Oh.
Nadira with her cigarette.
जैसे ये राजकुमार हैं, वैसी ये राजकुमारी.
Certainly, my lady.
This is Nargis.
Hello, my darling. How are you? साड़ी तो बहुत अच्छी पहन रखी है. कहाँ से ली? ओह, लीलाराम से ली. मेरे पास भी एक ऐसी ही साड़ी आज पहन कर आने वाली, लेकिन लॉन्ड्री से धुल कर निकला है.
Courtesan's daughter.
Goodbye, darling.
Jews were also involved in the Parsi theater. So I tell you a little bit about the Parsi theater. The Parsis were Zoroastrians who had been for hundreds and hundreds of years in India. They were a very intellectual community in Bombay, were very well-to-do. And here's a Jewish actress in a Parsi costume. And the postmark is 1906. Parsi theater included a number of Jews. One was a Beni Israel dramatist. One of his plays was called Maccabee. And he wrote in multiple languages, including Urdu and Marathi, Gujarati, and English. He was responsible for setting up a whole slew of dramas that featured women as action heroes with swords and whips and so on and so forth, starting with an Australian actress named the fearless Nadia in a movie called Hunter Wally. But he's most famous because he wrote the script for the first Indian talkie. You can see from this thing in the center that the third person there is Aliza, a Jewish actor. Our old friend Ezra Mir edited this film. He was a Baghdadi Jew. And Salochana was supposed to be the female star, but her linguistic skills were not up to it. So she took a year off. And the lead was played by Zubaydah. And Zubaydah's father was an African ruler, small state, princely state near Surat. And look at these two pictures of the woman with the African father. How she appeared in the movie. Would you identify her as an African? And look at this picture of Miss Zubaydah, J and Z being the same. She doesn't look very African to me at all. Everybody was involved in this. The hero was a Hindu. He was defended in a breach of contract by a Muslim lawyer. This Muslim lawyer later became the founder of Pakistan. The director was a Parsi, who were the Muslim, were co-owners of the production company. So this was a multicultural production. One of the most extraordinary things was one of the most famous plays of the Parsi theater, written in Urdu, that language associated with Muslims, was a play called Yehudi Kelatki, the Jew's Daughter. There were 4 different movies made based on this thing. Some of the things from my collection showing the different movies of the Jew's daughter. And they all deal with questions of intermarriage. Parsi Theater, the same Muslim playwright who wrote The Jew's Daughter, discovered a Baghdadi Jewish actress named Rose. Quite an important actress. Now, Rose had two cousins. These were sisters who went under the name Romilla and Pramila. So there was Rose. These are all not in the silent movies, in the talkies like Nadira. But the sisters were Romilla and Pramila. Now, Romilla is interesting because there was also, I showed you a picture of a lady on a bicycle. That was Ramallah. That was a different Jewish actress with a very similar name. And Pramila's history is perhaps the most interesting of all. Esther Abraham was her actual name. Supposedly, she taught at the Talmud Torah. There she is as the action hero in the center, the style which was created by a Beni Israel screenwriter. Daredevil. She was also a producer, produced 16 films under the name Silver Films. But the story is even more complicated than that. To show you how confused I become, I had these images from a movie called Jungle King, which starred Pramila as a Jane-like character. This is a movie like Tarzan and Jane. And nobody has produced more movies like Tarzan and Jane than the Indians, under the name Tarzan, Zimbo, and so on and so forth. Indians apparently love these movies. There was a second movie called Jungle King, a totally different movie. It stars a child actor named Haidu. Well, actually, Haidu is Pramila's son. It's sort of a weird name, Haidu. Haidu is better known as Haider or Haider Ali, Muslim name. Down further, you'll see that it's produced by the four aces, Maurice, Akbar, Ashgar, and Haidar. Who are the four aces? Her four sons. Pramila, the Jewish lady, had four sons, Maurice Abraham, I don't know who his father was, and three other sons and a daughter with Muslim names. So there on the right, you see young Haider Ali, and you see him again in the middle, but this time they've changed his name. But to make it even more confusing, Pramila has brought in the rest of her family, the Abraham family. So you see the guest artists are Georgie Robin, Albert Benjamin Joe Abraham. Her son is Ashgar is listed as an actor, but also Kumar Jr., which is her son Haidar Ali under a different name. The producer is Maurice. He's in control of production. He's her oldest son. But the producer is Begum Naki Jahan, later Miss India. Muslim lady who's Miss India. Pramila, when she was pregnant, was also Miss India. And Begum Naki Jahan was, in fact, Pramila's daughter. Got all this? It's not going to be a test. So there's Pramila later in her life with four of her children. So supposedly she taught in the Talmud Torah in the boys' school in Calcutta. She was married in a shrine dedicated to a Sufi Muslim saint. And her husband was named Kumar, a Hindu name, but he was really a Muslim. Now, one of the things that's very often said about the small Indian Jewish communities, that these isolated communities survived because there was no intermarriage, none of that, and so on and so forth. And I don't know how they survived. And one of the things always said about India is that means always survived because there was no intermarriage. Take Pramila's family. Her paternal grandmother had a Hindu husband, but yet she tried to make sure that Jewish women were married within the Jewish community. Her father's first wife was a Christian. Both her parents were Jewish, and her father was associated with a Muslim courtesan and filmmaker whose daughter became the movie star Nargis, who you saw. You're following all this, that these Jews they were not isolated from other Indian groups. They were not isolated from the British at all. Pramila's husband starred as the Emperor Akbar, was a Muslim emperor. And their son, Hyder Ali, who you met as a movie star, wrote one of India's biggest recent blockbusters, Jodha Akbar. His father starred as Akbar. He wrote a film about a marriage, a love marriage between a Muslim emperor and a Hindu woman. He himself married a Hindu wife. And he always jokes about it and says that it's interesting that he was a school dropout with ADD, and his wife, that he's the Jew, and his wife, who's not Jewish, is the neonatologist. And there is Hyder Ali on the right carrying his mother's coffin. She's buried in the Baghdadi synagogue, in the Baghdadi cemetery in Mumbai. And according to this, she raised her children in both faiths. So now I finished my lecture and we're going to play a game. You've seen all sorts of Jews, people who are not Jewish, or people thought were Jewish, and so on and so forth. I'm going to play a short clip for you and ask you to identify the Jew. I'm going to give you one hint. The singer is not Jewish. The singer is tell me who the Jew is in that scene.
We've asked the answers in the chat and we're waiting to get them coming through.
Yeah, there's one answer here from Jay Kanabar, the girl in the golden dress.
Wrong. That's the obvious one.
Another guess. How do you
I
pronounce
told you
that?
the person, the singer was a Muslim.
Right. The singer was a Muslim. Sorry, Lisette.
It's a trick question, obviously.
Trick question. Sarah says, was it one of the dancers or the musicians?
One of the dancers, the guy in the white suit. So this is very typical in India. Many of the songs, I don't know how many songs. There's one person who's done, I think, over 35,000 songs. She never appears in the movies, but she sings all the songs. So Muhammad Rafi is singing, but the guy in the white suit who's dancing is a choreographer named Herman Benjamin.
Herman Benjamin?
Yes, how could we not have it? And there's another Jewish choreographer who is very important to a woman. So I think what I've tried to say to you is that Jews have been part of India. They were not just sojourners there. And wherever Jews have been, they've contributed in many ways. And as we heard at the beginning, Walter Kaufman was an important thing, but he was one of many of the Jews who contributed so much, even though they were just Holocaust refugees who were there just a few years. And it's amazing how much Jews accomplished for India.
Ken, shall I turn off the screen sharing now?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you supposed to do?
Wow. Well, that was an amazing expose, I should say, of the subject. Thank you so much. And I suppose the big question is, how does a Washington psychiatrist get interested in India and Jews in India in particular?
Well, I started Indian paintings, and the heart of my collection is Indian paintings and other things related to the Maharajas. And there's an old Ashkenazi story about the first Jew who was allowed to go to university in Russia. And they said, "What will you write about?" He said, "I'll write about the Jews." They said, "You can't write about the Jews." They got disgusted with them. They said, "You have to take zoology because that's not going to do." He says, "Okay, I'll do what you say." He comes back with his PhD thesis, the giraffe, and I mean, it's amazing to me how many important contributions Jews have made to India and how atypical the contributions have been. The Beni Israel community is known for hundreds of years for being soldiers. Who were the two most prominent? There are Jewish generals and admirals who were Beni Israel. Who were the two most important soldiers who were Jewish in India? One was a Baghdadi Jew who played a huge part in the freeing of Bangladesh from the Pakistanis, General Jack Jacob.
General Jacob, yes.
Is a hero today. And for one of the books, the head of the Bangladesh Liberation Museum is going to write his story for us. So he's still a hero today in Bangladesh. And the other, who had an even higher position, was an Italian Jew who posed as a Frenchman and handled the largest Sikh Indian native army in the 19th century. So my whole thing is that wherever I went, I would find a Jew. It didn't matter what subject, there would always be, whether I was talking about Sikhs or Bangladesh or something. And from that liking of Indian painting, it led me to where I am today. Thank you.
Fascinating, thank you.
Should we let Marion Sofair
Yes,
join the meeting?
Marion, you did mention Abraham Sofair, but not the actor, the lawyer. And
Yes.
We're very privileged to have certainly his wife with us on the call. I don't know if Abraham is there.
It'll take me a minute to find her. I've got to go through the
Yeah,
names.
Marion. And actually, Marion did say he was he worked for Reagan. He was Reagan's lawyer.
Okay, Marion, are you unmuted? Marion should be joining us now. Marion?
Hi there. Hi there. Yeah, I could go get him. See if he can come.
Well, don't bother. It's lovely to have you with us anyway. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, and Rachel Sofair is also his cousin. I'll see if I can get
him. It's okay. And who else? We've got Rebecca, who is the niece of Mercia Mansfield, also on the call.
What's the name, darling?
Rebecca.
Rebecca.
So Rebecca.
She acted in Britain too, I think.
She lives in Britain. That's
I need
right.
to know the surname to find the name, darling.
Rebecca. I'm not sure we can find you.
I think I found Rebecca.
Okay.
Hello there. Thank you. I'm very impressed to hear your full talk and to see a couple more photos than even I knew of my Auntie Mercia. She was my great aunt and a wonderful character who was singing songs to us into her 90s. And it's very satisfying to see her career feature in this overview. So thank you.
Thank you.
And what are your memories of your great aunt? Did you know her?
Oh, she had a brilliant sense of humor. And she was also very,
Debbie.
very much somebody who did things her own way. So she lived across from my Auntie Flower. And I mentioned, so Flower Elias was quoted in Claudia Roden's wonderful empirical book on Jewish food.
Else,
And so it's very nice to have that area of Calcutta tradition covered. And I think, yes, Lynn Julius, this is part of maybe your work of bringing to light things that hadn't always been to light. And so Auntie Mercia had wonderful, witty songs and led a very unconventional life. And she was later in life in a film called, in the 70s here, Sunday, Bloody Sunday, quite a famous long film. And there's a bar mitzvah scene. So she's on the table.
How fascinating is that? Yeah. Marion, you didn't manage to find him. No, she's muted. Marion's muted.
Marion, did
Sorry.
unmute her. You should
Yeah.
mute yourself.
Yeah.
Unmute. Okay,
Sorry.
you have to unmute yourself, Marion.
Yeah.
You've got to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, he's just in the middle of something he can't.
Okay, no worries. I know he's a very busy man, even though
He
he's
said thank you.
retired. Okay, and I think we've got Claudia Roden here as well, haven't we? Who wrote that wonderful book on Jewish food, and I know there are several Indian recipes in it. Claudia, perhaps you'd like to say something?
I'll find Claudia.
Just 1 second.
While she's unmuting, I just want to say her piece in the book about the Indian Jews, her introduction, is so excellent. I recommend it to everyone.
Wonderful.
Right, well, Lynn has got the prize for the best
Yep.
question tonight.
Okay, this is
Courtesy-
courtesy of Rick. Rick's a fan.
Claudia, do you want to unmute yourself? I'm asking you to unmute.
Heard. So,
Claudia?
To unmute. Yeah,
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
yeah. What did you ask?
Well, just wanted to ask really, well, you've just had compliments showered on you by Marion here about the introduction to your book. How did you manage to research the bit on Indian food, Indian Jewish food?
Well, I did manage to, yes, meet several people here who gave me a lot of recipes and information. But I also did writing. For instance, I'm sorry that I forget names. It takes me a few minutes to remember them. But I did write to Jews in Cochin, whom I didn't know, and they sent me recipes. And then I sent somebody there who took photographs of them and wrote a story about them. And then my daughter went to Cochin on holiday, and she met the same people who had sent me the recipes. So I felt that I also met their daughter in New York. I somehow had various contacts in different countries, meeting up with the people. So yes, I was very lucky to get to know some of the people who gave recipes, and it was a pleasure meeting them.
Can I ask a question to Ken? What was so distinctive about the Parsi theatre? How did it differ from the other forms of theatre in India?
well, because it was so eclectic, it took in everybody's community, and everybody could be part of it: Muslims, Jews, Parsis, Christians, and everybody worked together. And one of the things that's most interesting is that in the 19th century and the early 20th century, there was a lot of adaptations of Shakespeare. And even into the later films, like A Jew's Daughter, they incorporate Shylock's speech into that film.
Mhm.
And the Parsis get along very well with the Jews. They were both mercantile communities, and there wasn't any animosity between the two of them.
Was there any intermarriage between them?
Parsis can't intermarry.
Well, they're not supposed to intermarry, but neither are Jews. And my wife's the expert on intermarriage.
Jay has made a lot of interesting observations in the chat. Do you want to share some of them with us, Jay?
Yeah, sure. It's just an article that I read today, and I posted a link on that article. The website is Times of Israel, and it's about just after the Second World War. There was a shipload of Polish Jews that were near the state of Gujarat, and the British did not allow them to embark. And these were children, mostly children who were running away from, or they had lost their parents in the Second World War, and they were running away. And the British did not allow them to embark from the ship, but they were near a kingdom in a place called Jamnagar, and that Maharaja, his nickname was Jam Sahib. It's all there in the article, and he supplied the food to the ship, and then they all embarked onto the land, and they were there for quite a long time. So that's the article, and
it's a wonderful article. I've been tracing that story for almost 25 years, and I'm responsible for, in one way, for something coming out. And this is why you got this long convoluted thing about, oh, people say that all the actresses in silent movies were Jewish and they're not, and so on and so forth. This is not the right story. This story is better than the right story. So people like this story. And I'll tell you how it all came about. Knowing that I'm interested in Jews and Maharajas, an Indian diplomat, on the first night I met him, said that he had been in Poland, and the Poles asked him to translate this text that they had made, to put up a plaque, to make sure it said what they thought it said. And that there were these Polish children, and that they were in this place, Kingdom of Jamnagar. And so I sent out feelers. The next thing you know, the Maharaja's son has invented this whole story about a ship that went to Poland around Africa, and the British wouldn't let it in, and the Maharaja let it in. That's not really what happened. What happened was that Hitler and Stalin raped Poland, and a lot of Poles, mostly non-Jews, were taken to the Soviet Union. There were Jews among them, and they were in Central Asia, and they were Siberia, and so on and so forth. When the Russians came in on the Allied side in World War II, they were taken down through Tehran, and there was a camp set up, led by a Catholic priest in this place. The British arranged it all. The Maharaja was very good to them. He was a wonderful man. I've written several articles about his other activities. But the story was that these were Jews, and that the Maharaja was against the British. The Maharaja was acting at the insistence of the British, and except for maybe 12 children, the hundreds of children were all Polish Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why you got this terrible sort of thing where I went into this convoluted thing. Please don't take the simple thing. Headlines in newspapers are very often wrong. False news, as we say in America.
Sarah,
Sarah,
you had some interesting observations. Do you want to share them with us? Sarah?
Sarah Manasseh. Ah, there you are. She's still muted. You're still muted.
No, she's not muted on our screen.
Okay.
We can't hear you, unfortunately.
Try again. No, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Oh, that's a shame.
So put up your sound. Maybe your sound is off.
No?
Her sound is on. Her mic is not muted. It must be a compatibility issue of some kind.
Yeah.
Maybe she put suppress the sound. Sure.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you once again to Sarah, because without Sarah, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have
She's
found
terrific.
Yeah,
Ken.
and she is our Indian.
She's an ethnomusicologist.
She's our Indian advisor to Harif by default as well.
Yeah, that's right. So just have a look and see if there are any more questions or observations. She was asking, actually Sarah was asking the question, what is the name of the book about Divakar that you mentioned early on?
The book about Divakar. It's a book about female impersonation, and I have it upstairs. I'll send it to her.
Right. And she also asked
okay.
another question. We also had Tehran children in Bombay who came to have an impact.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, of
Yes.
course, because the Tehran children are all part of this great wave of refugees, weren't they? From
you had ones from Iraq, as you know, and from Afghanistan. There were Afghan Jews on the right in front of the Morgan David Synagogue in Bombay as refugees.
Right. Okay. Yes, and many Afghani Jews.
Are there any more questions? Please have them keep them coming quick and fast in the chat or in the chat on Facebook. And what
There's a Frederick is.
Yes. Is there a question from
Frederick Ezekiel is trying to get on.
Okay.
Okay,
Fred.
right.
Fred.
I'll go
just
find
get
Frederick.
Fred. So.
Okay, Fred, do you want to unmute yourself, Frederick?
Okay, I am Fred Ezekiel. I am the first cousin of Abe Sofair and very, very proud of him. My folks went from Kirkuk to Bombay. I heard a lot about the movies, and Ken, you made it very clear, and I appreciate your contribution. I have a question. The word Bollywood, it looks like Hollywood. Does the B stand for Bombay?
Yes.
It does. It does.
And we also have Tollywood. Because there are multiple things.
So sorry, Fred. You're a cousin of which Abraham Sofair, the actor?
The one whose wife was here a minute ago.
Okay, the lawyer.
By the way, I think he's probably the most eminent Sephardic Jew who rose in the American government.
Absolutely. So
and I'm very
for not being here at the moment, because he's obviously very busy doing very important things.
Yeah, he's writing his memoirs, and hopefully it'll be published one of these days. He wrote a book on Iran. He has done fantastic. He was a judge in New York, and he had very, very interesting history. I'm very, very proud of him.
But you know, he's a singer,
his wife
too.
Marion. What?
Have you heard him sing?
Who?
He's a singer.
Hey, he's a singer.
Oh, yes. I've heard of him.
Multi-talented.
Very good. Right.
He's made recordings. Come on. Gotta give him.
Now, Nandan, you've been very quiet tonight. Is there any things you would like to share with us tonight?
Well, I have been researching at the National Film Archives, looking for any kind of material, vis-a-vis the early talkie films and the Baghdadi actresses there. But it's very difficult. And I wanted to ask Ken whether he had seen any footage of that time, the early talkies.
Wasn't a lot of it in Pune that went up in that fire?
Yeah, I think that's what happened. Yeah.
Was this a live?
The fire at
the archives? Was it the archives of?
Yeah, the film is very flammable, and we, they only had like one copy in many cases. In some cases, we don't have any copies. So I'm trying to get every still, every picture that I can get my hands on.
That's amazing. And actually, how come these films were shown outside India? Like, my relatives who lived in Iraq actually saw them as well. I mean, how come that happened? Is it, they have a very, very wide distribution?
Yes, I mean, some of these, like the first film of Nadira, I mean, you can find that all over the world. Or I have an Israeli poster of David's famous role in Boot Polish. So these Hindi films were shown there in Israel, and in general audiences, not. And they're very popular in all sorts of weird places, like certain places in Africa, Russia. Indian films are very popular.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, if we haven't got any more questions, Lisette, is it possible to see the movie, The Boot Polisher?
I go on YouTube. You'll find a lot of things on YouTube.
Yeah. Try YouTube, Lisette. Okay. And what do you do? Just type in Indian or Bollywood movies or something?
Well, you have to know if you started with NADIRA, Nadira, you won't get any of Salochana's films.
Right. We've also had a message from Yasmin who says the granddaughter of Rose is Rachel, who was a top model in Mumbai a few years back. Rose went to LA where I used to meet her.
So the Jews are a world people. And we have to understand that. And they fit in everywhere and they do good things everywhere.
Okay, so I think if there aren't any more questions, we will wrap up.
Thank you so much.
No, I'd just like to thank you, Ken, for your encyclopedic knowledge of this. And it's absolutely amazing how you managed to assemble all this information and to impart it in such an interesting way. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Next week, we have a special program for Shavuot. It's about ketubot, Jewish marriage contracts, since this is the season for marriages. And we go to the British Library, and Ilana Tahan will be displaying some fantastic examples of ketubot, manuscripts that are kept at the British Library. So please do join us for a very interesting talk next week. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And
now, Jan, you haven't seen the back of us. If I take them to Mumbai, I know whose door I'm going to knock on for some good advice and good guidance.
Please. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, so as is our tradition, I think we will now unmute everybody so you can all say goodbye or hello.
And then I'll put and put for you next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much. Very much.
Very informative. Thank
That
you
was
so
great.
much.
Thank you.
This is
Nice to
almost
see
done.
so many friends.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's that, Ken? What are you showing? A mango.
A lemon?
A mango.
There you go. It's easy. Thank you.
You got the Alfonso.
Kenneth, I had a question that wasn't answered. The boot polisher, somebody said they found it on YouTube, but there is no translation. Do you know anywhere we can get it? Subtitles. Sorry, it had no subtitles. I was told before that it had disintegrated. I'm delighted it hasn't.
Well, I think that nobody listens for the plot. You listen to the music.
There is a website where you can find subtitles to any movie.
Really? What's it? What's that website?
I have it somewhere. I have to find it out.
if you put in
Okay,
book
Alan,
Bollywood,
Alan,
you
you'll
should-
send it to me?
Alan Park, you have them.
Okay.
Alan, if you sign up,
Alan, you'll send it to me, please?
Okay.
I'm not sure you want the.
If you go on Google and you say subtitle to any movie, you will see the website. I found it on Google. It's easy to find. I'll look for it and I'll send it to you.
Thank you, Alan, thank you.
Ken, what about the newspaper?
What's this, tonight, 7:30 Baghdadi Jews?
Are the newspaper articles online?
Well, I didn't catch it. What? Something about a newspaper.
I was asking if the newspaper articles are online.
Someone has two speakers on. Could you turn off one? Everyone's getting an echo.
Anyway, was that the one? Was that the one? About the children?
Yeah, I think my article about Balachadi, Balachadi, I think is on somewhere on the internet somewhere.
Right.
But it'll give you some of the actual background and how this whole mess occurred. But people would like to believe stories, and I think that Jews are interesting. You don't have to invent stories about them. Just, I mean, it's an amazing community that was in India. Did so many interesting things.
Right. Okay. So Marion's just written the question in the chat. Do you find the newspaper articles online, or are you looking at copies in archives?
The newspaper articles. Both.
Okay, should we close the meeting out now, darling?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm very reluctant to close the meeting because it's just so interesting. But I suppose all good things come to an end. So
thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Fascinating talk. Thank you very much, Ken, and all of his supporting cast, so to speak. As it's the extras played an excellent role, as they would say.
Okay, well, the curtain's coming down now, I'm afraid.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you and good night, Ariel.
Good night.
Bonsoir.